Welcome to episode 50. We hit the milestone, guys. We didn't necessarily plan anything super mega awesome special because, we're all working parents of little kids. But we are doing a special episode because, Ruthi, I believe this was pitched to you by someone that you know and who had listened to a previous episode. Am I remembering correctly?
You got it. One of our listeners had a request. She's interested in freelancing and the potential for freelancing, or even what doesn't she know that she should ask about with respect to freelancing. And I had mentioned that you guys have both had some experience in this space, especially Alex, and that might be a topic for our upcoming show. And while this isn't something special per se planned for episode 50, I think the fact that it's somebody in the listening and wanting to know more about a particular topic, that in and of itself makes it pretty darn special.
Absolutely. So all the times that we have said, click the link below, hit us up on LinkedIn, we mean it. So go do that after this episode. And so we can do more like these for sure. So, I don't know, Alex, you have the most experience in this. You just want to take this and run it, or Ruthi, do you want to moderate it? I guess, how do you guys want to play this?
Yeah, I can moderate a little bit. I think first up, I'd just be, if you could recap, hey, this is what I've done in the freelancing world, and this is my history and background. That'd be awesome to set context.
Sure. All right. So my background with freelancing was I needed to eat, and nobody knew me. Nobody knew what I could do. I had a writing degree, and I could play guitar, and that doesn't necessarily translate to, a business job, marketing job, but I really wanted to get into marketing. So I started doing copywriting, freelance writing, website building, because at the time, WordPress was, really new. So that was kind of a new thing, and being able to say, yeah, I'm really familiar with, websites and SEO and how to do that. Was a big thing. Ultimately, I can boil down a lot of what I did, in order for Alex to talk about the stuff he did. It was a lot of freelance writing, ghost writing, for businesses or for opinion leaders, thought leaders at the time. And a lot of it just had to do with going to somebody who I thought was doing something interesting, or I had heard through the grapevine that they were looking for somebody. So then I just reached out and said, hey, you're doing something cool, or I heard you could use a writer. Let's meet for coffee, and just kind of went after it and tried to insert myself into some cool projects. And some of them worked, a lot of them didn't, but it allowed me to build up a portfolio that made it less risky to hire me for the other marketing jobs, right? Because I wasn't just the artist who's doing marketing. It's like, no, here's a legit portfolio of work. And the fact that he's a writer and a musician plays into the creativity or the creative team that we would put him on. So that's kind of the summary of my background. Alex, similar or totally different?
Totally different. So freelanced for about 2.5 years, somewhere around there. Came out of college, and you're talking about kind of like the reasoning for it. And came out of college with this idea that like CEOs must be geniuses, and anybody who's like owns a company must be like just the smartest people to somehow be making money, and that's got to be really hard.
Mm-hmm. Oh boy, has that opinion shattered.
That was the thing. That was a big piece of it. Honestly, it really was. So I had a marketing degree. I started working for a digital marketing company, agency. Ended up meeting a bunch of CEOs that, quite frankly, burst that bubble real quick. And it was like, man, anybody can do this. There's some people who are making some really, really obviously poor decisions, but they're sticking with it because that's what they wanted to do or whatever else. And, you kind of watched them crash and burn too. And it's like, man, if I could figure this out, and I'm, barely out of college. Maybe I can do this too. The other piece about that is I started doing web analytics, got very quickly into SEO. And myself and one of the guys at the company who was doing paid search, shout out to Jared Collier, who's still doing it. He's got a bunch of side projects and side stuff and software and stuff like that he's launched over the years too. But we talked about it a lot. The affiliate marketing was big at that time as well. So it seemed like there was a lot of like digital marketing, entrepreneurial kind of things. And I was meeting honestly with a lot of companies, and they thought my skills were somehow amazing, and I just learned them. Right. Like it was one of these things where it's like, how is this a rarity? Like you've been in this business for 20, 30 years, and you think this guy who has like a year of experience is somehow smart, which seems absurd. So there's that. And then also just kind of being in that space, there's other people who also talk about, side hustles, freelance work. I know somebody who owns a company who would love to know more about how to, deal with Google, My Business, which is called now Google Places, Google Maps, Google Listings or something like that. And they're like, hey, something about it. Could you talk to them? Could you help them? Maybe, you could charge them something, for your time and stuff like that. So it kind of like that atmosphere. Also, that agency was very rapidly growing. I was like employee 14, and after 2-3 years there, we had like 50 people, which is not a great time to be with the company if you don't like working crazy hours. And I worked 6 days a week, long hours every day, and it was just crazy. But it also afforded me an opportunity to learn a lot as well on that time, and online too. I mean, like there was tons of people who were doing attempts at some sort of at-home e-commerce or drop shipping or affiliate or freelance, contract work. And then at one point also I brought in Elancer and a couple other kind of short-term contract roles because we had a big content kind of problem. And it was stuff I literally had read online. It was like people were hiring people from, outside the US for, $100 words, kind of a rate. And $1 for 100 words. Sorry, I shouldn't use the analogy phrase there, but that I brought in started managing a team basically of freelancers doing that, posting jobs, them getting it done, and I was editing. Eventually, I hired writers and editors. Had a group of somewhere between about 5 and 30, depending on the project, and then also did a data entry group. Ended up hiring a group of people to do that too. So it was also like being surrounded by like, holy cow, like people are paying this agency a lot of money. I'm not being paid a whole lot of money. I'm an entry-level employee. Honestly, I eventually argued for a raise because I realized how underpaid I was, which was crazily underpaid. But there's also there was so much opportunity online, and there's also people in all these other countries who are also doing similar work for far different economic numbers and stuff. And there's It seems like something's got to work. And then one of the main things that really kicked it off was a book by Tim Ferriss called A 4-Hour Work Week. And it gets down to this point, and honestly, of the entire book, the piece that really got me going. And he was doing affiliate dropshipping stuff with the book. So, I mean, on topic for that, was a section of saying, what would be the worst? What would be the worst that could happen to him? And I think his was getting bit by a dog in an alley after being mugged or something like that. But it was like, what it was basically, it was like, if I'm going to do entrepreneurial work and really have a real high risk, no salary, no job, really, you're unemployed in a way. This is the best time to do it. Like, I don't have a wife and kids. I don't have anybody else depending upon me. I came out of college. Okay. I'm paying off my loans. This is the best time. So that's kind of like, if I was going to do this, I'm going to do this.
There's, for anybody who's considering starting your own agency or your own freelance thing or just your own thing at all, there's a wonderful video from a guy who started a design agency, and it's called F You Pay Me. And it cuts through, if you don't mind a little swearing, it cuts through to, all the insecurities of most people who like, hey, I'm really good at this job, but like, could you maybe pay me because you promised that you'd pay me? It's like, no. That's totally the wrong way of going about it. Like, I have a contract that said you would pay me. And I'm not going to, change the scope of work. I'm not going to do anything else because this is what's in the contract. You want something else? Sign a new contract. It's that simple. I highly recommend that video and adopting a little bit of that attitude when it comes to invoicing for your time.
I think, Dave, this segues really nice into one of the first questions I have for you guys, which is, talk to me about the fundamentals of freelance. Like, if you are going to be successful in this space, what do you need from the get-go, or what do you need to keep in mind as sort of the basics of going the freelance route?
So from my mind, there's what you want to be paid, and then there's what the market will allow you to be paid, right? And then the third element of that is what your personal brand will allow you to be paid. And this was something that even in the musician world, I saw this happen all the time, where it was like, hey, I need a drummer, I need a bass player, the gig pays X. And then that person comes back with, no, I want $200 for 3 hours or whatever, whatever the gig is. And they price themselves out of the gig. So then they have no money and nothing to do. And because they think, okay, I have all this experience, I can charge all of this stuff. So you still need to find that pricing piece that's correct. But I mean, now with so much information, with HubSpot and the Elancer and all the things, you can find a reasonable range of what agencies are charging, what you should charge as a freelancer, and then make sure that fits within what you're trying to make each month, because then that, okay, I can get by with this one client, which is really dangerous. I wouldn't recommend that. Or you could, get 2 or 3 and know that that's enough for what you need. But, it's feast or famine too, right? You always need to be on new business. You always need to be developing your next gig, and you're only as good as your last gig that you did. So, yeah, Alex, does that sit with you? I mean, you're kind of wrinkling your brow for anybody that's not watching video.
No, it was, let me hit the bare basics from like an accounting legal standpoint. Yeah. And then as well as kind of like getting into what you're saying about like what you currently do that people pay you for, right? And whether or not there's like a freelance contract version of that. And then like, what can you do, which is a little bit broader, but, let me hit like real quick. So for myself, so state of Minnesota, long story short, basically what you want to do is, one, have decent amount of savings, try to figure out exactly what your personal finances look like in terms of costs. Dave put it exactly about like, what you need to make per month. Trying to figure that out and try to at least figure out some sort of like savings plan, because honestly, on day one, you will not have any money. There's no money coming in. You're not owed a paycheck on day one. So you don't have a paycheck until someone starts to pay you, which means if you can start this on the side, extra hours, side projects, side hustle kind of thing, try to build that up until it turns into enough for you to, live off of. From my perspective, I was living very, very cheaply. So my costs were very, very low. Had a roommate, cheap apartment, worked out pretty well for that. But for state of Minnesota, so creating an LLC or limited liability corporation is extremely easy. You go to state of Minnesota's literally website and you can do the whole thing online. It's very simple.
Generally good life advice. Lawyers and accountants are friends. They're not scary people. They're friends.
Yeah, and there's a lot of pro bono kind of free work too. So local libraries sometimes have pro bono hours with lawyers, accountants. They're usually trying to drum up business and that sort of thing. So they, offer some free time with that. But it allows you to get some basic questions if you have like absolutely no idea. It's nice to talk to somebody who has, a professional opinion and idea how to do things. Picking a name doesn't really matter because that's your LLC. It's just what you're going to basically be putting maybe on an invoice, but really if you ever want to change that, which I did, you can do something called a DBA or doing business as, and that's as easy as finding a place online that will post an ad literally in a newspaper somewhere and send you the clipping back. There are literally newspapers that are just that because they're filling a law that basically requires that you have to have this thing posted.
Can we just pause just for a moment? I love talking to you guys because the amount of information that you have shared just in the last 2 minutes, from an accountant and a lawyer at a library to this weird niche purpose for newspapers, I don't get that anywhere else, so appreciate it. Keep going.
It's how to do on the cheap. I realized that the local big newspapers, they charge an insane amount for one of these things, but you don't actually need to. You need just a newspaper, and they literally just give you a little envelope with a little like clipping and says like that's enough, which you then can send the PDF version of it to the state and say, hey, I proved that I have now officially announced that I'm going to change my name or change my company's name. And that allows you basically to use multiple names. And really, again, what you put on your invoices can be completely different. Just don't use your personal name and keep things separate. So that means a different bank account. That does mean if you have purchases and all the rest, try to have it all underneath that, because if you ever get sued, your LLC is the thing that will go bankrupt instead of you, because then your LLC was the one who did the problem. They were the person in the lawsuit that did the thing. So their assets get sued. So you want to keep those assets away from your assets. So save your assets by doing that. The other thing I like, as I kind of pull this together, accountant is definitely your friend. The other thing would be insurance. I was doing SEO work. So I found online some rather cheap insurance, because let's say I work for Target.com and I script their website. What they lose in a minute or an hour is a lot. And they do sue their contractors if you messed up. So I had $1 or $2 million worth of insurance on me for e-commerce SEO work, and cost of maybe $150 a year. Like, hunt around. There are companies out there that basically allow you to have like business insurance and that kind of thing. Again, you want to keep your assets away, but sometimes you can certainly get sued, and it can be pretty bad.
I was just going to bring up insurance, so I'm glad you did too, because I know some, some guitar teachers and music lesson teachers that teach out of their houses. But they don't have the insurance for, the lesson space in their basement. Oh, dude. So then I'm like, man, if anybody slips on the ice on the way into your house, like, you're liable. Yeah, you're liable for that. Like, there's a reason there are these industries, to protect yourself from people, especially in the US, where they're just going to sue the crap out of you for any reason. Yeah. If you're doing business anywhere else in the world, good on you. You don't have to be so worried about, punitive things, but like,
cover yourself.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah. Okay. So if I am not in fact daunted by everything you guys just said about having insurance to cover me, about setting up an LLC, about just sort of getting the sort of basics.
Honestly, that's just like the first week. That's like
table stakes. What am I doing to launch this thing? What do I need to think about establishing a new freelance business?
Yeah. Honestly, also everything that I ran through, you can do in 2 hours. Mm-hmm. Like if you
especially with ChatGPT.
Yeah, well, unless you read your own contracts, which I highly recommend you should.
But I mean, like finding all these things online, honestly, a lot of these services are very easy to find. And I was going to suggest also a quick shout out. It's reduced in number of personnel, but Small Business Administration is fantastic. The state of Minnesota, like their state department, it's wonderful. The people there ask them any stupid question. They're real used to it. I mean, honestly, you can ask them, like, what does it take to start a business in Minnesota? They have a webpage that goes through all of that stuff, too. But, I mean, if you want to talk to somebody, totally talk to them. Local city councils and government as well is also really helpful for basically getting businesses to grow and start new businesses and all the rest of that kind of stuff. It is in their best interest to get more tax revenue, So there's a ton of resources also out there. who help small businesses and entrepreneurs, because there's, of course, a million laws and a million things. But it's really nice to talk to other people. And the other thing that I would heavily push is find some friends who own small businesses, or people that just seem friendly, who you're like, hey, can I grab coffee with you and ask you a ton of questions about how you started your coffee shop because I buy coffee here, or something like. I knew some family members. I grabbed breakfast and lunch with them a bunch of times because I didn't know what I was doing. And it's great to talk to somebody.
But that's the secret, Alex. Nobody does.
No,
right?
I know, nobody does.
That's the whole thing with this. I thought CEOs were so smart. And then you have a meeting with them and you're like, huh? Because, nobody knows, which is why there's the whole consulting industry, because that's literally just about holding your hand saying, it's okay.
Yeah.
You can spend the money. It's okay.
And everything will be fine. But Ruthi, your point, launching. Launching literally means getting paid. And launch ain't launch until you get paid. Throwing out,
which could be 60 to 90 days.
At least. Depending on what you're trying to kick off, throwing something on LinkedIn and saying oh, I now do this. Okay. Have you been paid for it? Because when you get paid, that's really when your business is a business. Before that, it's a concept. And I push that heavily because it is so easy to get locked in the idea of oh, I got to get my logo right. No, you don't. My first invoice, honestly, Microsoft Word has invoice templates. And I used one of those and it worked great. Do you need a logo? You don't. Do you need anything other than the basics for legal standpoint? No, you don't. You don't need anything like that. All you need is someone who's willing to pay you for something. And that's launch. That's real launch. If you want to throw out a website, that's cool, but you don't necessarily need one. If you want to have business cards, that's cool, but you don't need them.
Right. They make great bookmarks.
Yeah, I got a couple that I'm using right now. I gave my kids them. I was like, here, use it to pretend money, because I got a bunch of them. They're pointless. But so many of those things that are pushed to small business owners of you have to have a million business cards or whatever, custom envelopes or some kind of crap. You don't need any of those things. So keep it simple and just try to get paid. And that means meeting people and talking to people and trying to figure out where these people are going to be and how you're going to meet them so that you can build up this business idea. And that's really where I'd focus on, is honestly just spending time trying to find the people who are going to pay you.
Well, I think too, the setup, the legal, the accountants, it's interesting to me in my journey through doing freelance stuff and the sort of full on agency enterprise side of things is, just understand that everybody has their own things that make them nervous, right? This is totally an example. Alex might be totally caught up in establishing the business, right? I want to get all the legal stuff right, all the accounting stuff right. Whereas I know a bunch of other people that are just we'll start something and then we'll figure it out. Oh my God, sales. I can't do sales. Sales is not as hard as most people think it is. If you can get somebody talking about what they enjoy doing or aspects of their job that could be a problem, and you can find out more about that, that is how you start the conversations that then lead to, you know what, I actually might know somebody who might be able to help you with that. If you're interested, give me a call. Right? It's not that hard of a thing. Where it does become hard is if you get really pushy, like those telemarketer calls that we talked about in the last episode, where it's about what the business wants, not about what the consumer wants. Right.
And I got to imagine with freelance, you have to be even all the more focused on what a potential paying customer wants than say the business does, because you don't have that sort of large institution to ride on. If you're not meeting what a customer needs, you're not getting paid. Is that true?
Yeah. That would be one of my main points, is pivot. When I started freelancing, I had no intention of ever having a client. I was totally going to go an affiliate marketing route. I eventually started working down that route and pulling numbers and realizing that it was a joke. Like there was no way I was ever going to make money off of it. Unless you argue your own contracts, the public contracts are awful. Like you just won't make a living doing it. So it's an industry that pitches to its own and sells it to its own. So I got caught up in the pitch and thought that it was a thing. No. So I had to pivot real quick because I quit my job with this intention of doing this whole business thing that totally flopped within like the first month and a half. So pivot. So what it was some people I knew who had asked me to do some work on the side. So I went back to them and said like, hey, do you have anything else? Or do you know anybody else who kind of does this stuff? So I started talking to others. In the end, I think I had like 4 or 5 different business models running at one time. Basically, I had direct clients who I had met and who knew me, and they were paying me directly. I had a business partner, and he was like, he called himself like a virtual agency kind of thing, but really he was like a kind of general contractor of sorts. So companies, he would sell a ton to all these little companies. They would go to him, and then he'd be like, oh, okay, I need a guy who can do XYZ. And then he would find people to do that, and he would pull me in anytime he had SEO, paid search, kind of
just take like a little bit off the top, right?
Exactly. He always had his cut, and I got paid via him, right? And he was awful about paying me, but that's a whole, again, to Dave's point of make sure you get paid. Exactly. I did subcontract work under a number of different agencies. There's a bunch of them in the Twin Cities. I literally just went through the paperwork for so many contracts that are still apparently active. But there's a bunch of agencies, and it was the same thing of basically they need always occasionally flex extra help. And SEO, there's not many people in that field, so it's difficult to find someone who can, show up, especially to a client meeting, impress them, and then like talk about, your expertise to them. And then, they get the sale that way. And then you start getting, paid from that. If you're a really great project manager or agency owner, it's great. If you have a terrible one, it's terrible. You're working with a bunch of people.
I know a bunch of people that make their whole living being basically a contract worker for another agency. They use the agency as their new business development kind of thing. And then they come in, but since they're always in on the agency meetings, the client's always like, well, okay, so you work here. And they're like, well, actually.
I had that awkward conversation once where it's like, oh, so where's your desk? And the agency was trying to pass me off as one of their employees because they were trying to look bigger. It's super awkward.
How did you track and plan all this? I mean, that alone is a job in and of itself.
And then on the side, I was hiring developers to basically build a software product that I thought would be able to launch other stuff. Basically taking a giant database of keyword research data and then trying to figure out like where the patterns are to try to figure out what problems people have been looking at and not finding anything online. And then the other one, I was working with a guy I knew from college who lives in Vegas doing affiliate work. And we were doing side projects and trying to come up with like an automated way to do SEO, which totally didn't work. So I mean, those ones kind of just failed out and fizzled out. All of this stuff, basically, to Dave's point, is natural. I mean, basically, you talk to one person, you keep basically being in that group and keep asking like, hey, by the way, and keep talking to all the contacts that you have that are in that area who might be having full-time businesses themselves and saying like, hey, if you ever need help with this, let me know. You ever need help with this, let me know. And basically kind of pushing that all around. One big thing that I would ever say, if you're going to do that kind of work, get a retainer. And that was one thing that I failed to do and really messed up my finances. Basically, I was working project because it's really easy when someone says, hey, I got this kind of thing I got this problem with. How much would that cost me? And you say like $300. And then you say, great. And you send the contract, you do the work. And then after that, you have no money, no job. Because you were spending all your time working that job and you weren't selling the next one. And now you have nothing. And that was my finances. It was a roller coaster. I mean, when I had a contract with somebody, I was 40 hours a week or more doing their thing. And if I could, since it was project-based, if I could do it really fast, my hourly was great. If I did it really slow or there was a ton of hand-holding, a ton of stuff like that, it was rough. GE used to do this thing of times 3, and I highly suggest it. Basically, think what's realistic and then multiply it by 3. That is what it always ended up being because of all the hand-holding emails, extra meetings, extra calls, extra. Oh, the invoice didn't work. Send it again. Like, it's insane how many hours you end up blowing up on a project. But if you can get a retainer, do it.
That's the other thing too, where a lot of people jump into freelancing or starting their own thing because they're excited about doing a particular type of work, right? I'm going to spend all of my time designing amazing logos. Like, no, actually, a third of your time will be design work. Like half of your time will be getting the next project to pay next month's rent. And then all the other time that's remaining is your admin.
Yep.
So that's why it's like, build it as fast as you can in order to hand off the pieces you absolutely hate, so that you can, I mean, that's why like starting something with somebody else, I'm always kind of a fan of, because then where I have gaps, somebody else can come in and help, or, you know, take that, and then both of us can be happy. But yeah, it's a whole lot. And, you know, we, in our meeting notes for this show, we have like a whole list of other ones that we can easily talk about, but I think this episode could go on for like 6 hours. And unfortunately, we do have meetings that we have to go into. So I'm going to leave it on a cliffhanger right now. So in summary, when you're thinking about freelancing or you're ready to take the plunge, you're going to do it, right? Get all of your admin ducks in a row. Have your accountant, have your lawyer, have your contracts. You know, there's a lot of templates and a lot of resources online to help you out with that. Spend the time doing that before you quit your job, you know, and have to do that unpaid, right? And don't let the administrative stuff scare you to the point of not chasing after what you're interested in. It will figure itself out. You can do it. You know, if you've met some of the schmucks I have, you can do it. And another really easy thing to do is to send us show ideas, like we said in the first one. So like, subscribe, share, send this to anybody who you think could use the advice. Ask any questions in response to this, and I think we'll chunk out the notes that we had for the next couple of episodes. So thank you for making it this far. Thank you for sticking around, Alex and Ruthi, for 50 shows. I've had a lot of fun. See you in the next episode of Enterprising Minds.
Cheers.